Welcome everyone to a Smithsonian Learning Lab webinar. This is an introductory webinar, so if you're new to the Learning Lab, this is a great way to get started. I'll go through the homepage, give you a little bit of information about the web platform itself, and then I'll also walk you through what it might look like to find collections or resources of your own. And how to create them in the Learning Lab. But before we get started, I thought I would introduce myself. My name is Ashley Naranjo, and I am a museum educator here at the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access, which is located in Washington, D.C. We're right across the street from the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, which is a modern art museum of the Smithsonian, as well as the National Air and Space Museum. So if you've ever been to the National Mall, we're located right near there. But a lot of my work actually includes working with teachers and librarians and other museums across the country. And so with the Smithsonian Learning Lab, what you're able to do is actually have access to all of the digitized content of the Smithsonian in your classroom for teachers to be able to create new lesson plans, but also for students to be able to explore their own learning through the Learning Lab and do their own research. So we'll show a few examples of that in just a minute. So if you're just joining us, like I said, my name's Ashley Naranjo. I'll kind of be your tour guide for today. You can feel free to use the chat box. As you're watching the YouTube video, there's a chat box either on the right-hand side or I think it might be below too. And you can use the chat area to say hello. We'd love to hear from you. You can also introduce yourself. And if you have specific questions along the way, please feel free to ask them within the chat box. So you would type them and then I'll make sure to verbalize them as I'm doing with the Smithsonian Education pop-up that you just saw on your screen as well. So like I said, I'm a museum educator, but a lot of my work is collaborating with teachers across the country, all different grade levels and age ranges, as well as all different subject areas. And I think that's one of the special things about the Smithsonian is being able to look at a topic from all different perspectives, from history, art, culture, science. And so with the Learning Lab, you actually have access to all of the museum's content that's been digitized. So why don't we take a peek at the Learning Lab? So in order to get to the Learning Lab, it's learninglab.si.edu. And so we'll pop that up on the screen. Your homepage might look a little bit something like this. And so again, learninglab.si.edu, that's the homepage for you. And here on the homepage, I wanted to point out a few things. So up in the top left is your search bar. That's where you can type in a topic or a specific person of interest you might be, thinking about researching, or a specific time period and era, all sorts of things. A scientific name if you're looking for a specific species. We've got tons of specimen, especially from the Natural History Museum here in Washington, D.C. The other thing I wanted to point out, in addition to this search bar, is in the top right, there's a Smithsonian sunburst. And when you click on that sunburst, that's really your navigation. So that's how you can tell if you're signed in. Right now I'm signed in. You can tell that because I have the opportunity to log out. But this is also where I can find my own profile. So if I click on profile, this is kind of my landing page, so to speak, for the actual Learning Lab. And all of the collections that I have curated over time are available on this page. So that's a great spot as you're kind of thinking about, publishing your own work and sharing it with the wider kind of learning community. This is a great spot to be able to have all of those collections in one place. The other thing that you'll find is favorites. So we'll talk a little bit more about bookmarking things, keeping them for later. Maybe you do a search and you find this great thing, but you're really kind of in a flow, a workflow, and you're working on a specific topic. You can always save that other topic for later. Collections, and I'll talk a little bit more about those, but those are really kind of your way of making sense of the Smithsonian objects. And so you can put them into what we call collections. And you can see when you click on that, you have both published and unpublished collections. I've been working on a lot of collections over the past few weeks. And so right now I have 124 published collections, meaning that they're searchable for everyone else to find. And then I also have 194 unpublished collections. And those are things that I'm working on. Maybe I'm still kind of tweaking or testing with students or other teachers. Or maybe it's just something that's private for myself that I don't necessarily want to share with the wider community, but it's maybe a brainstorming tool of an upcoming workshop, that sort of thing. So you have those two tabs there. And all of this can be accessed through the Smithsonian Sunburst in the top left. We'll go back to in the top right, excuse me. We'll go back to the homepage for just a second. And again, we have that search bar that I mentioned. We have that sunburst that's on every page. And then also in the bottom right, there's a question mark. And so if you click on that question mark, not only can you submit feedback. So let's say, you're working through the Smithsonian Learning Lab and you either have a question about a specific resource or the way that the Smithsonian presents information. You can submit feedback there and it'll send an email to our team. But you can also submit feedback saying, hey, a great tool to be added to this platform would be X, and that would help me in my work by doing Y. So that's a great way to kind of get in touch with us immediately. It just auto-generates a contact sheet where you can fill in your name, your email address so we can get back to you, and then a message as well. And you can also check I'm not a robot, which sometimes that's the hardest part. But so we'll click out of that. That's how you can submit feedback to us. The other things I wanted to mention, there's a help section. So if at any time as you're using the Learning Lab, you realize that you have a question about something, that's a great place to visit. And it's constantly being updated too. So this fall, we'll actually have some additional features within that help section. And then last but not least is the ability to enable screen tips. And so these are really just kind of visual cues, pointers for each time you come to a new part of the Learning Lab. It might walk you through specific things that are available to you. So for example, as you're searching, it might tell you, hey, did you know that there's both resources and collections? And so we'll go through that. But just in case, if you need additional help, this is a great place to click on. So again, we've kind of had these three things that are on every page of the Learning Lab. We've got the search, we've got the sunburst, which is kind of our navigation, our menu, and then we've also got this question mark. As we scroll down on the Learning Lab homepage, there's kind of four main verbs of things that teachers, educators, learners can do on the Learning Lab. The first is to discover, so to really find kind of those great resources, digital images, recordings, text, videos, and again, across disciplines too. So folks might not know, but the Smithsonian actually has 19 different museums, 9 research centers, and the National Zoo. And so across any given topic, you can find something by just searching in the Learning Lab. And so that's a great way to kind of filter your search from the Smithsonian. In addition to resources, which are kind of those building blocks of collections, we have collections. And collections are really kind of aggregations or groupings of resources. So for example, it could be a collection of all the Civil War uniforms that you find in one place and you kind of put them together. Or they can be kind of more like a lesson plan where you're saying, have the students do X, here's some great questions, here's how I would do it, put it, in a paired discussion and then have some group work, those kinds of things. And then the last one that you could have is maybe a student assignment where it's specifically written towards a student. And again, we'll go through some of that too. If you're just joining us, I wanted to mention, welcome to the Smithsonian Learning Lab. We're doing a brief tutorial of what's possible in the Smithsonian Learning Lab. We've kind of already hit on some of the key parts of the homepage, and now we're going through, after Discover, the next big piece, and you can read a little bit more about other types of educators who have used the Learning Lab and look at their profiles. The next big element of the Learning Lab is to be able to create collections. So you can take resources that you find and make something new, basically. You can take these individual artworks, for example, photographs, documents, blog posts, videos, podcasts, letters, etc. And you can put them into a collection and you can create one from scratch, for example. So you can really have this really specific theme for your collection, and it's almost like you're curating a digital exhibit. Um, or you can copy someone else's collection. So maybe someone else has done kind of some of the hard work of curating their collection. What you can then do is say, hey, I love what you did for the fifth graders in your school, but actually I have kindergartners. So I'm going to kind of think about the ways that I can differentiate your lesson for my students. And so when you make a copy of a collection, that actually allows the other person to see how you've adapted it. And it allows for you to kind of start to edit and refine and personalize that collection. The other thing I wanted to mention was, in addition to, I think we're up to over 3.8 million resources, those individual kind of media types from the Learning Lab, you can actually also upload additional content, external content from outside the Smithsonian. So in addition to, for example, an artwork from the American Art Museum, you could also have a graphic organizer, for example, or even a photograph that you took in your own community, and you could upload those files. You can also say, hey, I think Smithsonian resources also pair especially well with things like Library of Congress, primary sources and documents and texts, or National Archives, for example. And so you can upload those both as files with good citations, or you can also upload them as hyperlinks, and there'll be external websites that are included in your collection. There's also the ability to annotate or add hotspots to images. So this idea that you can also add some interactivity. You can add quiz questions alongside an image or a resource, excuse me, and you can pinpoint specific details on an image using hotspots. And so you can say, hey, be sure to notice, this detail within an artwork, let's say. Or you can also say, hey, what do you notice? And so that's a great way to kind of really bring focus to students as they're kind of looking and examining artworks, images. Quiz questions can also be posted, so they could be posted alongside a video, for example, and that can really kind of help students in directing their thinking as they're watching a video. Here's some simple questions that I want you to answer alongside it, and it just adds that little extra layer of interactivity. There's also ways to browse these collections too. And so I had mentioned topical collections, those thematic collections, teacher collections, which are very similar to lesson plans, and then student activities as well. You can also look at different collections that we have that are based on themes across the Smithsonian. And one of my favorite is National History Day, which if you're not familiar with it, it's a national research project that students in the secondary level can compete in. And they do authentic research around a given topic. And this year's theme is breaking barriers in history. And so we create a lot of kind of springboard collections, idea generators, brainstorming kind of suggestions for students as they're identifying what their topic is within the larger theme of breaking barriers. So often with those collections, we'll include a lot of primary sources and secondary sources for students to be able then to do their own authentic research and kind of give it their own slant as they're thinking about creating either a documentary or a website or even a paper or a speech. So there's a lot of different features there too, but the Learning Lab is a great place for inspiration with those types of projects, as well as a brainstorming tool too. Next is Share. And so with Share, I wanted to mention a few things. So you can actually, like I mentioned, once you've created a collection, you can decide to keep it for yourself. Maybe it's just something that's more of a personal interest, or you can hit publish. And when you hit publish, that actually allows other teachers across the country and other Learning Lab users to be able to find your collection. And so I know one of my greatest kind of points of pride is when I know that other teachers are using some of the content that I've curated, and I'm saving them a little bit of a trip in trying to figure out where some of those best resources are, or the best questions to ask and pair alongside some of those questions are, those resources are. So that's an option. You can certainly publish, and then that collection will become searchable within the Learning Lab. The other piece is you can also embed collections. So if you have, let's say, like a library homepage, or even for your classroom, you have specific web pages that you point students to, you can actually just grab a simple little bit of code, HTML code, and embed a collection or even a resource onto your own website and have students just fully access them within your own website versus coming to the Learning Lab. So there's a lot of flexibility in the ways that students access these collections. I should also mention that in order to do things like a search, or even to view collections that you create, your students don't necessarily need an account. And so they can simply do a search and access the information. When you need an account and it's a free account too, I should mention, is when you want to start to personalize things and create your own collections. And a lot of students have actually done that as documentation of their own learning. As we're kind of halfway through the homepage, I also wanted to welcome anyone who's new to the webinar. Feel free to ask any questions at any time. We're kind of still going through the homepage, thinking about all of the possibilities of what's possible on the Learning Lab, opportunities for search, kind of curation and making sense, personalization of specific resources, and sharing more broadly. And then last but not least, I wanted to point out we have a blog. So if you're doing something interesting with the Learning Lab, shoot us an email using the submit feedback button and let us know about it. We'd love to hear about it. We also feature content from teachers that we've heard are doing great stuff with the Learning Lab. So for example, here in March, we had a great teacher, Miss Kelly, who was a second grade social studies teacher, and she started the year off with a unit on communities and used artworks that described rural, urban, and suburban communities, and students went through and did some visual looking exercises. And so just a great way to kind of use some of the content from the Smithsonian in your own classroom. There's several other blog posts here as well that you can go through and see kind of the archive. Once you sign up for an account, you can actually subscribe to the Bright Ideas newsletter. And so that's just part of signing up for an account. And so we update this during the school year pretty regularly, just about every 3 weeks. And so our last issue before the spring was teaching foreign languages. And so spotlighting teachers who had actually used Smithsonian resources to teach Spanish language and culture, as well as a teacher who used it to teach about Chinese language and culture. So all those issues, if you click here, you can access the newsletter that way as well. And then finally, as you scroll down, you'll see upcoming events. So today is August 14th, 2019. Hopefully this is how you figured out how to join us. But if not, if you joined us in another way through social media or through the banner at the top of the Learning Lab page, this is where we typically post upcoming events. Already mark your calendars for December 11th, 2019. I'll be joined by colleagues from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, as well as the National Portrait Gallery. And we'll be talking about how we use the Learning Lab to construct curriculum. And so it'll be kind of a great mix of art and history, and that'll be through the National Art Education Association too. So that information is available there. But often we also have in-person workshops, so maybe we're coming to your region, that we'll post there, as well as other webinars on specific topics too. And we've done everything from early learning to foreign languages and global competencies, as well as STEM learning and connections in arts integration too. I should also mention that we also hold online office hours. So every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, basically the same thing happens that we're looking at now. So we've got a webcam on with one of our staff members. Next week, you'll be joined by Tess Porter, who's a digital content producer here at the Smithsonian Learning Lab. And she'll just basically have her webcam on, and she'll be willing to share her screen. And you can ask her any questions as you're kind of getting back into the school year, questions about the technical functionality of the Learning Lab, but then also things, for example, thinking about how to do a really good search, or examples of collections that have already been made that Tess might be able to point you into. So those are also listed here, and usually they're just hyperlinked, so you have access to just pop right into those YouTube videos and ask questions just as we're doing today. We also have archives too. So I've done a lot of work with the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And often what my colleague Kendra Flanagan will do is just hone in on one collection in depth. And so we'll go through the context of each collection and really give you kind of a spotlight on a specific collection. And so we're also planning for some this fall as well. So stay tuned for that as well. With that, I also wanted to remind you that you can ask questions in the right-hand side of the screen or below it, depending on what your device looks like. And as you ask questions, we'll be sure to bring them up on the screen and answer them as you'd like. So that was kind of a tour of the homepage. We're about 20 minutes into our webinar. And so thus far, really, we've talked a little bit about discovering and searching for collections and resources. We've talked about curating our own collections. And then we've also talked about sharing more widely within a learning community, and also learning from museum educators like myself and other experts through blog posts, newsletters, and webinars too. So let's do a sample search. I'm not sure if anyone has any ideas on what to search, so I'll go ahead and give it a first try, but we can also play around if you have specific things that you're looking for within this webinar. So I'll do environmental movement. I've been doing a little bit of work on that with other collections. And so on my screen, I typed in environmental movement in the top left. And Tess Porter has a question. She says, how can I start a search for resources? So perfect timing, Tess, and thanks for that question and kind of modeling what it looks like to ask a question from the audience. And so we've searched for environmental movement, and this is what our search results page looks like. One thing to keep in mind is there's a few things. So this is our search bar. There's two tabs here. There's the resources tab, and then there's also the Learning Lab collections tab. So thus far, we have about 223 resources containing the words environmental movement. And as I kind of take a quick scan, a quick peek, I can see a lot of them are posters and pins. There's a little bit of media here. This looks like a video. They also have images from Greenpeace, it looks like. And so as I scroll through, I can kind of visually scan. But then I can also, as I scroll up here, and I'm just going to turn on my light for just a second. So bear with me. There we go. If I don't move, my light turns off, so I apologize. So as we look for the images in this resource, the search results, we notice, obviously that this is a kind of a visual scan. You can also toggle between this grid view that we're in right now and list view. In list view, this allows us to see the titles and the resource provider, as well as a little bit of a sneak peek of some of the information with each of these resources too. So you can also scroll through that way. Another thing I wanted to point out was that if you refine your search, which is underneath the environmental movement search box here, you refine your search. This will actually get at one of the questions from Darren Milligan, who asks, do you only have images? And so sometimes I say images a lot because that's a majority of what we have. A lot of our collections are very visual, but our resources include things, images, audio, video, text, learning resources. And so when you click on refine search, you can say, show me this specific media type. So images, audio, video, text, and learning resources. You can also hone your search to say, show me just things that are currently on exhibit. So let's say you're here in Washington, D.C., or maybe you're making a visit, planning a trip, a field trip. You can also hone your search to say, just show me the things that I'll be able to see in the museums themselves as well. You can also hone your search to say, I know for sure I want something that's related to American history, so I can check that box. I can also check images, let's say, and now I'm going to update my search. And now I've gone from 223 resources to 23 resources. I'm glad to see. Thanks. Cool. Thank you, Darren says. So glad to see that I answered your question for you. So now I've really honed my search from a bigger search that might have been a little more unwieldy to something that really kind of fits exactly what I'm looking for. And as I scroll through, I can choose a specific resource. I can also switch back to grid view, let's say, and I'll click on this poster here. This is a poster. It says Freedom to Breathe Environmental Poster. And so this gives me the title of the resource. I can zoom in to see specific details. So you can see kind of the funky lettering and then the Statue of Liberty. And you can see that it's an ad or a poster for controlling air pollution. So that's the title there. If I click on the I button, I can actually see a description from the museum itself. So here it says, scientific studies have linked air pollution to quality of life and health issues. And then it goes on to describe what the poster, specifically, the context of the poster. It was produced in 1969 by the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and it resembles rock music posters of the era. So this would be a great resource to be able to use with students to talk about advertising, environmental movement, the era of the time too, because right away I noticed the lettering of this poster too and was kind of intrigued. And then also just thinking about the type of advertising that they were doing and who they were trying to reach too. So a lot of different connections that you could make. It also gives information about the type of image and where it's from as well. It's also currently not on view, so this is really an opportunity to be able to view this resource, not at the museum, but here online. And there's tons of resources that are just like that as well. All right. So with that, that's how you do a search. And we'll go back to the home page. If there's no questions, we might end a little bit early today. It's just about 4:30, so we might pause for a little bit. If there's no questions, it looks like there's just a few viewers. And so we've received some great questions thus far. And we've tried out a new platform too. So I wanted to mention that this is a new platform that we've been kind of trying out as far as webinars go. So it's allowed us to have a little bit of extra functionality and try it out too. So hopefully this was a helpful live introductory webinar, getting started, learning how to access the homepage, think about all of the different possibilities and opportunities that are available through the Smithsonian Learning Lab. I should mention that it's free. So this is a free resource for teaching and learning and allows you to really curate collections of those resources and make sense of them. With that, I'm going to thank all of our audience members for joining us for our first webinar of the 2019 and 2020 school year, and look forward to seeing what you create on the Learning Lab. Thanks, everybody.